This man was born with a magical superpower, the ability to identify someone's age, annual salary, and job just by their appearance and attire. With this power, he thrived at the casino. Soon, he noticed a man wearing glasses named Lee Dong-jin, a data analyst at the casino. Lee Dong-jin's job was to tailor services to enhance the casino's profits based on customer information, a simple task for someone with his abilities. As expected, the man quickly lost all his bets. Seeing this, Lee Dong-jin signaled a waiter to approach and took the bewildered man to the restaurant, offering him a VIP accommodation voucher as a distraction to keep him betting. Sure enough, after the waiter left, the man calmed down, ready to gamble again. Lee Dong-jin believed it was better to customize services to keep customers coming back rather than letting them lose everything. His approach was so effective that it earned the approval of the consultants and the casino owner, enhancing his reputation. However, while celebrating his success, Lee Dong-jin discovered his car had been vandalized. He immediately reported to the police station, where he saw two men fighting. After calming them down, he identified them as family members who were reluctant to cooperate with the police. Shortly after, a woman with a white dog, the mother of the two boys, entered the scene, confirming Lee Dong-jin's analysis. Impressed by his accuracy, the previously skeptical police promised to catch the culprit responsible for damaging his car. After leaving the police station, the fortunate Lee Dong-jin caught the last subway train. Before he could settle in, he heard a confession nearby. Looking towards the sound, he saw a boy in the corner seemingly pursuing a girl in a black hat. Just then, the girl turned her head, and Lee Dong-jin, seeing her side face, felt as if the world had suddenly paused. The girl was Park Mi-jeong, the goddess he had secretly adored since high school. However, Lee Dong-jin dared not approach her because she was known as a witch at school. Any boy who got close to her would get hurt or even lose his life, which isolated her from others. Once a boy who liked Park Mi-jeong didn't believe the rumors and tried to walk her home on a rainy day. Before Park Mi-jeong could be pleased, lightning struck the boy dead. During the memorial for the boy, Park Mi-jeong stayed behind alone, crying quietly. Several boys had already been hurt after interacting with her, which was widely discussed among classmates. Despite the rumors about Park Mi-jeong, Lee Dong-jin never believed them and attributed everything to coincidence. Rumors about her spread throughout the school, and during group activities, Park Mi-jeong was always alone, seemingly out of place. During a school outing, while taking photos for everyone, Lee Dong-jin noticed Park Mi-jeong sitting alone on a bench and took the opportunity to take several photos of her. At that moment, a boy was accidentally injured. Seeing the boy being carried away, a panic-stricken Park Mi-jeong looked worriedly in the direction he was taken. Although Park Mi-jeong hadn't done anything, she still felt responsible for the boy's injury. Lee Dong-jin watched the helpless girl with a heart full of pity. From then on, he paid even more attention to her every move, keeping his crush on her hidden deep within his heart. He noticed that Park Mi-jeong always ate lunch alone on a bench. To protect her from the sun, Lee Dong-jin asked his mother to donate a sun umbrella to the school. Originally, Lee Dong-jin could only protect Park Mi-jeong silently in his own way. However, another incident occurred when a defiant boy insisted on walking Park Mi-jeong home and was struck by a falling high-voltage wire, dying instantly. After witnessing this, Park Mi-jeong fully embraced her identity as a witch. Lee Dong-jin looked at her with sympathy, wanting to talk to her. But after Park Mi-jeong saw the insults left on the bench, she disappeared down a small path in the campus. As memories flooded back, regret swept over him like a tide. Lee Dong-jin watched her figure, not wanting to miss this chance again, so he followed her out of the subway, maintaining a distance just as they had in high school. The words he had long harbored in his heart still remained unspoken. Around the corner, Lee Dong-jin saw Park Mi-jeong feeding a stray cat and quickly hid. Hearing her scold herself, his heart felt incredibly complex. He had hoped that changing locations would make Park Mi-jeong happy, but it seemed the label of witch had become a permanent mark on her heart. Lee Dong-jin chose not to approach but silently followed Park Mi-jeong until she reached her home. The next morning, Lee Dong-jin learned shocking news. The boy who had confessed to Park Mi-jeong suddenly convulsed and collapsed after they had left. This deepened Lee Dong-jin's contemplation, as he had always believed the witch label was just a coincidence. Recalling various strange incidents from high school, a troubled Lee Dong-jin confided in a friend. Analyzing past phenomena, They theorized that everything might be due to a certain law, meaning that if they could identify this law, they could break the witch label and free Park Mi-jeong from this curse. Perhaps only Park Mi-jeong knew that the curse that had killed many of her suitors was the phrase, "I like you." Saying "I like you" to her meant certain death by the next day, and even speaking a few words with her could cause injury. From a young age, the beautiful Park Mi-jeong had been pursued by countless boys, all of whom seemed to suffer bad luck. For example, a simple conversation with her might result in someone mysteriously falling into a well, or immediately after confessing, they could be struck by a car accident. When Park Mi-jeong finally had a crush on a senior in her early teens, before she could talk more with him, he collapsed, foaming at the mouth. Faced with questions from others, a panicked Park Mi-jeong had to lie that he had been stung by a hornet. These continuous, bizarre incidents terrified Park Mi-jeong, but she still believed they were coincidences. After transferring to a new class, the beautiful Park Mi-jeong quickly became the center of attention. On the first day, one of her admirers thoughtfully handed her a box of milk. Seeing the milk on the table, Park Mi-jeong felt a faint unease. The next day, news of the boy's poisoning spread throughout the class, leading classmates to suspect Park Mi-jeong. That day, as heavy rain fell outside, a male classmate kindly offered to walk Park Mi-jeong home. Listening to his endless talk, Park Mi-jeong suddenly felt a bad premonition. The classmate eventually uttered the cursed phrase. Watching him walk away, Park Mi-jeong's unease grew. Sure enough, just as she turned around, lightning struck from the sky, and she heard the classmate's distant scream, confirming her worst fears. From then on, she became deeply guilt-ridden, spoke less, and avoided contact with others. Despite this, some boys still approached her. During a school outing, a boy who didn't believe in the curse tried to be friendly with her. Frightened, Park Mi-jeong quickly packed her things to leave, hoping to avoid any accidents. However, shortly after, the boy who had approached her twisted his ankle. Moreover, many boys who had contact with Park Mi-jeong experienced various accidents, and she became known as a real witch. The boys who once adored her now wanted nothing more than to stay away from her. However, one brave soul caught up with Park Mi-jeong after school to comfort her. Perhaps the boy's consolation was effective, as Park Mi-jeong felt less resistant. But on their way, the boy suddenly decided to confess his feelings to Park Mi-jeong. At that moment, a transformer above started malfunctioning. Park Mi-jeong guessed what might happen next, but before she could stop him, she saw him right ahead. Suddenly, the wires connected to the transformer fell onto the boy. Sparks flew, and the high voltage killed him instantly. Watching the once lively boy turn into a cold corpse, Park Mi-jeong finally accepted the fact that she was a witch. She knew there was no place for her in school anymore, and that she seemed destined to live in a world of her own. To prevent further accidents, Park Mi-jeong chose to drop out and stay home. Unaware of what his daughter was going through, her father went to the school to investigate the truth. After hearing the rumors about the witch at school, he realized the immense pain his daughter had endured. Park Mi-jeong thought that staying at home would make people forget about her, but the rumors spread like mold throughout the village. The villagers blamed all their misfortunes on her, and her father had a fierce argument with them. To take care of Park Mi-jeong, her father decided to move with her to Seoul, hoping for a better life. However, the very next day, while helping her father with potatoes, Park Mi-jeong was bitten by a snake that emerged suddenly. When she regained consciousness, her wound had been bandaged, but her father lay on the ground. It turned out her father had long suffered from severe periodontitis. After sucking the snake venom from her ankle, the residual toxins in his mouth acted quickly, causing his condition to worsen. Park Mi-jeong wanted to call for help, but her father, to avoid involving her in another witch scandal, quickly stopped her. In his final moments, he comforted Park Mi-jeong as he had when she was a child. As his hand slowly dropped, Park Mi-jeong's last remaining relative passed away. Just then, villagers arrived and witnessed the scene. Seeing her father on the ground, everyone regarded Park Mi-jeong as the murderer. After that day, a devastated Park Mi-jeong fled the village, and no one knew where she went. After Park Mi-jeong left school, Lee Dong-jin tried to use documents to prove she was not a witch. However, when he returned to the village, he learned from his mother that Park Mi-jeong's father had died, and the villagers blamed her for causing injuries. Despite Lee Dong-jin's attempts to defend her with national death cases, he could not change the fact that the village had voted to expel her. When he arrived at Park Mi-jeong's house, he found only an empty room, making his carefully compiled evidence seem futile. Thus, Lee Dong-jin's unspoken love came to an end. But life and love do not pause for anyone. Lee Dong-jin decided to continue striving for the elusive Park Mi-jeong and switched his major to statistics in college, not for a career in public service or for profit, but to make up for past regrets. He submitted his data to his professor for review and, under guidance, re-examined extensive domestic data, looking for similarities and related factors, even recording the weather conditions on the day of each incident. His comparison led to an unavoidable conclusion. All witch-related incidents had one thing in common. Park Mi-jeong had been present at the scenes and linked to the victims. Facing this outcome, Lee Dong-jin was devastated and did not know how to clear Park Mi-jeong's name from the witch accusations, temporarily falling into a misconception. Fortunately, with a friend's guidance, he gradually overcame this. Over time, Lee Dong-jin became a data miner through his teacher's recommendation. His life changed when he learned of his mother's serious illness, who told him she was handling her properties to avoid leaving burdens for him after her death. At the real estate office, Lee Dong-jin discovered the truth. His mother had bought the unclaimed property and land of Park Mi-jeong's family, and admitted she had personally driven Park Mi-jeong out of their hometown. After seeing Park Mi-jeong's father discipline those spreading rumors, Lee Dong-jin's mother learned about the witch rumors from the villagers, who also warned her to watch her son to avoid him becoming the next victim. While cleaning Lee Dong-jin's room, she found photos he had taken, including close-ups of Park Mi-jeong, and guessed her son's feelings. For his safety, she led a village vote and then stormed into Park Mi-jeong's home with others. However, seeing Park Mi-jeong's helpless and pitiful expression, she lost her initial fierceness. As a mother, she couldn't bear such a sad scene. Despite her change of heart, it was too late to stop the others who demanded Park Mi-jeong leave immediately. Understanding their intentions, Park Mi-jeong tearfully agreed to their wishes. That evening, she arrived at the station with her luggage but found no transport out of the village due to the late hour. Consequently, she struggled to walk dozens of kilometers to the next town. Fortunately, Lee Dong-jin's mother saw her en route and gave her a lift. She also learned that after her father's death, Park Mi-jeong had no relatives, friends, or even a place to stay. Regretting her actions, Lee Dong-jin's mother realized that Park Mi-jeong was just a child like her son. Despite being unable to undo what had happened, she bought the unclaimed property of Park Mi-jeong's family, planning to apologize in person and persuade her to return. Unfortunately, she never met Park Mi-jeong. However, she was relieved that her son always believed Park Mi-jeong was not a witch. She had seen the statistical evidence her son had left at Park Mi-jeong's house and high school books he had prepared for her. After smoothing out the scattered documents, she read them thoroughly. Although she didn't understand all the details, she wanted to strengthen her beliefs through this act and hoped to meet Park Mi-jeong again someday. Before parting, Lee Dong-jin's mother asked her son to apologize to Park Mi-jeong on her behalf if he ever saw her again. After his mother passed away, Lee Dong-jin found the proof materials he had once left among her belongings. From the traces left on the papers by his mother, he could see that these flawed materials had been reviewed many times, demonstrating her firm belief that Park Mi-jeong was not a witch. Now seeing Park Mi-jeong again and hearing her helpless and despairing words, he also anticipated possible accidents. Meanwhile, Park Mi-jeong, after completing a day's translation work, notified a friend, thanking them and sharing her dreams, grateful for the job provided by the friend which helped her sustain herself. Later, Park Mi-jeong went to the rooftop, looking down at the couples below. She envied them, but did not dare to hope for more, nor did she dare to step beyond her safe space, as only there could she isolate herself without hurting others or facing blame. Sometimes Park Mi-jeong was confused, not understanding if it was the world that confined her or she herself confining the world. Regardless, she felt only mannequins could safely be by her side without harm, not knowing someone else was also quietly helping her. For this, Lee Dong-jin quit his job, even though his senior offered him substantial profits and shares. He then approached a real estate agent, planning to move across from Park Mi-jeong, but the corresponding apartment was already occupied. Lee Dong-jin asked the agent to introduce him to the upstairs tenant. With financial persuasion, he managed to meet the person. However, no matter how the agent tried, the tenant was unwelcoming. Not only did they refuse an apartment swap, but they also wouldn't even allow him to look inside. Thus, Lee Dong-jin planned to find another way. During an elevator ride, he tried to find out what type of rice cake the tenant liked, only to discover that although the tenant's family sold rice cakes, he hated them the most. After helping enthusiastically with waste sorting to win over the tenant, Lee Dong-jin's eagerness seemed to annoy the tenant. Eventually, the tenant approached Lee Dong-jin and agreed to swap apartments. In return, Lee Dong-jin offered to pay 3 months of rent for him. Once the apartment was secured, Lee Dong-jin prepared to gather current information on Park Mi-jeong, so he went down to the mailbox area. After some searching, he successfully retrieved some information. However, his sneaky behavior aroused suspicion from a friend, forcing Lee Dong-jin to make up an excuse about visiting someone on the 3rd floor, which turned out to be a hair removal center. He entered the center under his friend's curious gaze. Meanwhile, the friend found Park Mi-jeong, who was eating a large pork bun and then, motherly, tried to feed Park Mi-jeong. She did this to help Park Mi-jeong forget her troubles and to remind her that there are people who don't care about her past and are willing to support her moving forward. The friend often comforted Park Mi-jeong, advising her not to always translate travel shows, but to experience them firsthand. Unbeknownst to her, Park Mi-jeong had already planned to travel, choosing a sparsely populated island as her destination, marking a positive start. The friend encouraged her, and with her support, Park Mi-jeong became much more cheerful and less downtrodden, actively seeking her own happiness. That evening, after a day's work, Park Mi-jeong stepped out of her room because it was her time to shop when streets were nearly empty. During her walk, a streetlight caught her attention. Unknown to her, when Lee Dong-jin found out the streetlight on her usual path was out, he contacted the police and then inquired about the maintenance department. Park Mi-jeong continued to feed stray cats, seeing them as like herself, struggling to avoid crowds and only gathering when someone like her, perceived as a witch, appeared. Unbeknownst to her, it wasn't just cats gathering, but also Lee Dong-jin, who silently stood by her. In that moment, Lee Dong-jin vowed to find a way, by any means necessary, to lift the curse from Park Mi-jeong and free her from her confined life. The next day, Lee Dong-jin returned to his old town and reached out to his former high school classmates for help in contacting others. He also learned that Park Mi-jeong's best friend was teaching at their old high school. Lee Dong-jin then visited the school, the place where Park Mi-jeong's witch label began. He proceeded to open the school's archive, planning to find a solution among the data. Lee Dong-jin learned from the village head that a resort would be built around the former home of Park Mi-jeong. He seized the opportunity to inquire about injuries and deaths in the area. According to the village head, strange incidents used to occur there frequently. However, coincidentally or not, nothing has happened since Park Mi-jeong left. Hyun-kui was the last child to have an accident. Lee Dong-jin then found Hyun-kui, who recalled that right after Park Mi-jeong's father passed away, he had worried she might be too sad to eat. So he brought her some bread and offered a few words of encouragement before leaving, after staying for about 12 minutes. On his way home, he encountered a wild boar, which puzzled him as to why it appeared at that time and place, leading to a lengthy hospital stay. Lee Dong-jin also asked if he had feelings for Park Mi-jeong. Hyun-kui admitted he was too afraid of rejection to confess his feelings. The next day, Lee Dong-jin opened the old archives and after extensive research, found all the casualty files. He listed all the injured individuals, noting that the accidents mostly centered around Park Mi-jeong. Soon after, a classmate led Lee Dong-jin to another elementary school classmate, who, despite often teasing Park Mi-jeong, admitted he had liked her but never confessed. He fell into a sewer and sustained minor injuries. Later, Lee Dong-jin learned the approximate address of another classmate and visited numerous houses in the area until he found him. This classmate recalled giving Park Mi-jeong candies on Valentine's Eve, staying for about 10 minutes, and getting hit by a car as he left, which took 7 weeks to recover from. Then, Lee Dong-jin found another classmate who had given Park Mi-jeong a drink. Before he could confess, Park Mi-jeong interrupted him and fled, but he ended up with a broken ankle. As for the other classmates, Lee Dong-jin found that they either tried to show off in front of Park Mi-jeong, resulting in shoulder fractures, or happened to be in the infirmary with her, ending up with severe head injuries. Based on the information provided by these individuals, Lee Dong-jin returned to the original classroom and began measuring the distance from where Park Mi-jeong used to sit to the injured students, finding that none were more than 10 meters away. These were categorized into minor injuries, severe injuries, and fatalities. Lee Dong-jin discovered a pattern involving space, time, names, dialogue, and confessions. From this, he formulated 5 hypotheses: being in the same space, talking to her, knowing her, confessing to her, and breaking the first 4 rules all constituted dangers, especially if one had feelings for Park Mi-jeong. At that moment, a classmate approached, revealing her long-standing crush on senior Yik-jong, who had instead supported and lent his books to Park Mi-jeong. Out of jealousy, she spread rumors that Park Mi-jeong was born causing her mother's death and had a witch-like nature causing injuries in elementary school, escalating the situation significantly. Now regretting her actions, she hoped Lee Dong-jin could help her apologize to Park Mi-jeong. Lee Dong-jin believed that only a face-to-face apology would show true sincerity. He also expressed regret about not having information about Park Mi-jeong's life after middle school. Upon hearing this, the classmate remembered that she had heard from senior Yik-jong that Park Mi-jeong had also been admitted to the same university he attended. Lee Dong-jin then went to the address provided to find the senior, but he did not obtain any useful information there. Therefore, Lee Dong-jin found the man he had met on the subway. According to the man, Park Mi-jeong only went to the cinema when it was empty, and that was when he fell for her. He learned her name while checking tickets and later confessed to her at the subway station. However, this puzzled Lee Dong-jin because the man had triggered all the known rules without facing a deadly outcome. While pondering what variable might have saved the man, Lee Dong-jin noticed a name tag on his chest. After asking, he learned that Park Mi-jeong did not know the man's real name. Based on this clue, Lee Dong-jin revised the 3rd rule. It wasn't merely knowing each other. Park Mi-jeong had to know the person's name for the danger to occur. That evening, to test the exact range of the space rule, Lee Dong-jin used a tape measure on the loft's railing near Park Mi-jeong's side, measuring a distance of 7.9 meters. Estimating visually, the distance to Park Mi-jeong's room exceeded 10 meters. As he was retracting the tape measure, its catch suddenly malfunctioned, and just as Park Mi-jeong stood up, he hurriedly pulled back the tape, but she approached the railing, and the stuck measure scratched his face. In this scenario, where only Lee Dong-jin could see Park Mi-jeong and she could not see him, he determined that the dangerous distance was within 10 meters. Lee Dong-jin privately met with Park Mi-jeong's friend, explicitly stating he was collecting data about Park Mi-jeong after she left the village. The friend, mistaking him for a stalker from a hair removal shop, was initially skeptical. Lee Dong-jin explained that he, senior Yik-jong, and Park Mi-jeong all came from the same village, and showed the friend's statistics from 13 years ago, documenting over 40 injuries or deaths. Shocked by the extensive data Lee Dong-jin had compiled, the friend felt such hypotheses were merely speculative, and that errors could still occur in these so-called laws. It was precisely because of this uncertainty that Lee Dong-jin needed more information from the friend. As Park Mi-jeong's only friend, her best friend naturally did not want to dig into her private life, especially without knowing Lee Dong-jin's persistent motives. It was only after Lee Dong-jin expressed his desire to help Park Mi-jeong regain a normal life that her friend shared her own feelings of compassion and a long-standing hope for Park Mi-jeong to return to reality. Despite her efforts over 9 years, she had made no impact. Now, upon meeting Lee Dong-jin and hearing his intentions, she placed her hopes on him. Initially, to avoid attention in university, Park Mi-jeong always wore black, which ironically added to her mystique and led people to approach her and ask for her contact details, all of which she ignored. This lifestyle continued until the end of the semester, when a male student used the excuse of watching a movie to approach her and, despite being clearly rejected, pursued her again. His subsequent fall marked the beginning of Park Mi-jeong's misfortunes in university, as her friend noticed that male students often met with accidents. Additionally, it was known among student council members that Park Mi-jeong was extremely popular, though not for good reasons. On her first day at university, she met senior Yik-jong, who was terrified of her. In an attempt to appease his girlfriend, Yik-jong spread rumors that Park Mi-jeong was a witch. Initially taken as mere gossip, the situation escalated when their English professor, who took a liking to Park Mi-jeong, wrote a confession in English under the pretense of giving feedback during her test submission. This frightened Park Mi-jeong, prompting her to flee and contact the hospital for an ambulance preemptively, which the hospital refused. Park Mi-jeong then decided to quickly leave the university, but her friend blocked her and noticed the professor watching Park Mi-jeong. Upon hearing this, Park Mi-jeong prepared to leave immediately. But before she could, the professor fell from a building. Despite her friend's reassurances that it was not her fault, Park Mi-jeong could not help but feel guilty. From that day, rumors became reality, and Park Mi-jeong could no longer continue her studies, leading her to officially withdraw from university. Her friend harbored complex, unspoken feelings for her, and found Park Mi-jeong renting in a soon-to-be-demolished area. However, Park Mi-jeong seemed unwelcoming, insisting that her friend leave as she felt pitied. Despite her friend's efforts to explain, Park Mi-jeong asked her not to visit again. When leaving, her friend left her phone number, which she waited months to use. Eventually, she contacted her only because Park Mi-jeong's house was broken into, and she needed advice on what to do next. The friend had long wanted to move her from the desolate area, and subsequently took Park Mi-jeong to her aunt's place, renting an attic at a minimal cost, where she lived for 9 years. During this time, the aunt did not raise the rent and even tried to set her up with boyfriends, all of which Park Mi-jeong declined. After learning about Park Mi-jeong's life over these 9 years, Lee Dong-jin measured the distance between her and the professor at the time of his accident. The friend also contacted the student who had injured himself. He had once tried to give Park Mi-jeong a ride, and after being refused, rode his motorcycle beside her for about 10 minutes. Although he confessed his feelings during this time, luckily, he forgot to introduce himself, so he only suffered a few broken ribs from his flipped motorcycle. They then found the man who fell, who also spent about 10 minutes with Park Mi-jeong. With these still unclear data, Lee Dong-jin thought of a way to reduce errors by testing the rule himself. His friend did not understand why he would risk his life to do this, but Lee Dong-jin felt sympathy for such a troubled girl. After observing for several days, Lee Dong-jin noted that Park Mi-jeong ordered groceries every Tuesday. He then took a delivery job at the supermarket, accepting minimal pay for Tuesday deliveries. Entering the dangerous 10-meter range, he timed his encounter to last exactly 10 minutes, then rang Park Mi-jeong's doorbell, leading to their first official meeting. This was the first time in 16 years that Lee Dong-jin had been in close contact with Park Mi-jeong, and it was also their first conversation. Seeing Park Mi-jeong looking frail and helpless, Lee Dong-jin was momentarily distracted. Fortunately, her question snapped him back to reality. To ensure precise timing, Lee Dong-jin made a point of delivering the goods right to her doorstep. With plenty of time, he planned to have her verify the goods were correct. However, Park Mi-jeong, worried about potential misfortune, did not want to check the items. Lee Dong-jin then warned her that missing items would lead to reprimands. Reluctantly, Park Mi-jeong glanced at the items as Lee Dong-jin carefully checked them. Their interaction was minimal, limited to the necessary questions and answers during the goods inspection. After receiving the payment and having Park Mi-jeong sign, Lee Dong-jin prepared to leave quickly. He said goodbye and ran downstairs, making sure the entire interaction did not exceed 10 minutes. Over the following days, Lee Dong-jin found he had no accidents. To reconfirm, he secretly entered the hazardous area. After several days of testing, he observed no anomalies from just over 8 minutes up to 10 minutes. He then decided to test durations beyond 10 minutes. The wait was tense, with every breath filled with unease. Lee Dong-jin stayed for 10 minutes and 14 seconds before planning to leave. He only made it down one floor when the stairway light malfunctioned, causing him to tumble down the stairs. Fortunately, he was wearing a helmet, so he only twisted his ankle, confirming the rule that staying within 10 meters for over 10 minutes was dangerous. During subsequent deliveries, Lee Dong-jin continued to deliver to the doorstep, and their conversations gradually became more frequent, bringing a bit of happiness to Park Mi-jeong, who had not had such enjoyable chats with anyone in a long time. Therefore, while checking the goods, Lee Dong-jin not only became meticulous, but also enjoyed this rare and precious time. However, surprises always come unexpectedly. This time, Park Mi-jeong's method of payment was not cash, and the boss had forgotten to inform Lee Dong-jin. So, he prepared to go back to fetch the card machine. Just then, Park Mi-jeong asked him to wait and quickly returned to her room. With only a few seconds left, Lee Dong-jin, filled with tension and unease, finally received the payment Park Mi-jeong brought out. He then quickly rushed downstairs despite his injured foot, managing to keep the time under 10 minutes. He had just breathed a sigh of relief when he almost collided with a delivery person at the door. This forced him to step back to a fortunate position where he suddenly heard a strange noise overhead. Looking up, he saw an advertising light box falling down. This experience made Lee Dong-jin realize that not only space and time but also the number of conversations between them were limited. Meanwhile, ever since Lee Dong-jin entered her life, Park Mi-jeong began to look forward to each encounter. Hearing the delivery bell, she even prepared a drink especially for him. However, this time, filled with joyful anticipation, she was greeted not by Lee Dong-jin, but by someone else. Still, due to their regular interaction, Park Mi-jeong had developed the habit of checking the goods at the door, even in Lee Dong-jin's absence. As for Lee Dong-jin, to verify the limit on the number of conversations, and to ensure his own safety, he purchased a set of heavy motorcycle gear from a motorcycle gear shop. Then, injured, he returned to the supermarket. Upon seeing him, Park Mi-jeong's first action was to confirm if he was the same delivery person as before. Once confirmed, she stepped aside, while Lee Dong-jin silently counted the number of times they spoke. The delivery was going smoothly this time. The time spent together did not exceed the limit, and they only exchanged a few words, 8 to be exact. However, Lee Dong-jin's injury caught Park Mi-jeong's attention. Worried that she might have caused it, Lee Dong-jin lied, saying it happened during sports, which relieved her. After checking that they hadn't exceeded the time limit downstairs, and seeing no signs of trouble around, he mounted his motorcycle. Unexpectedly, he hadn't gone far before losing control of the bike, crashing into a car parked roadside. This accident confirmed Lee Dong-jin's theory that speaking more than 10 sentences could trigger danger. A month later, it was the day for Park Mi-jeong to go on a trip. Lee Dong-jin decided to accompany her, seeing everything she saw but kept his distance for safety. Park Mi-jeong sat at the front of the vehicle, so Lee Dong-jin chose the back, maintaining a safe distance of 11 meters. Despite the thrill, the distance was necessary to ensure safety. However, an unforeseen event occurred when an elderly lady boarded, and Park Mi-jeong kindly offered her seat, having the distance between them. Initially, Lee Dong-jin felt fine and planned to get off at the next stop. But then, the bus got stuck in traffic on a bridge, it started raining heavily with thunder, and a junk vehicle began moving slowly towards him, marking him as a target. Realizing the danger was only seconds away, he calmed his restless heart and, ignoring the surprised looks of other passengers, jumped out of the bus. His action caught Park Mi-jeong's attention, especially when a gust of wind blew his hat away, and she called out his name. Fortunately, Lee Dong-jin was well prepared. Under Park Mi-jeong's gaze, he climbed over the railing, planning to escape the inevitable doom. Just as he jumped, lightning struck the lamppost above. Soon after, Lee Dong-jin was rescued and taken to the hospital. Park Mi-jeong could only watch from a distance, afraid to come closer. To stay updated on Lee Dong-jin's condition, she constantly searched and refreshed the news on her computer until she confirmed he was safe. Meanwhile, her best friend, upon receiving a notification from the police, rushed to the hospital and demanded Lee Dong-jin stop his reckless behavior. However, Lee Dong-jin had a favor to ask her. He wanted to confirm one last variable, which could only be revealed by Park Mi-jeong, that those who like Park Mi-jeong end up injured or dead, and he wondered what would happen if Park Mi-jeong liked someone. In a gloomy mood, her friend took Park Mi-jeong on a trip. Once they arrived, she secretly called Lee Dong-jin. During their conversation, she casually asked Park Mi-jeong about her romantic interests, given that many liked her. Park Mi-jeong revealed she liked Yik-jong, a senior she had known since childhood, especially admiring his smile. She went to church every week just to see him. However, their interactions decreased after she discovered that Yik-jong suffered from epilepsy. They reconnected when Yik-jong got into college, and he gave her his handwritten English notes. But he suddenly collapsed and frothed at the mouth while giving her the notes. That night, Park Mi-jeong, holding epilepsy medicine, lacked the courage to knock on his door. By morning, Yik-jong had moved away from the village. Years later, they met again in college. But Yik-jong had forgotten the notes he gave her and avoided Park Mi-jeong, leading her to withdraw her affections. Hearing this, her friend understood who Park Mi-jeong liked and criticized her poor judgment in people, as Yik-jong had spread rumors that made Park Mi-jeong's life difficult in college, ultimately forcing her to drop out. In fact, Park Mi-jeong doesn't blame Yik-jeong. She understands that strange occurrences around her can spread rumors through other channels. Suddenly, her friend sensed something was off, so she asked Park Mi-jeong to answer a few questions truthfully. First, about the size of the church chapel, which Park Mi-jeong recalled was roughly the size of an attic. The church service usually lasts about an hour, and they would chat freely at the tea party afterward. Also, the notebook Yik-jeong had given her contained a confession of his feelings. According to Park Mi-jeong, Yik-jeong had triggered all the rules, yet he did not die. Meanwhile, Lee Dong-jin found Yik-jeong's notebook among the data and saw the confession. It turned out he had discovered this notebook months ago among the books Park Mi-jeong had discarded. He immediately confronted Yik-jeong, asking why he had concealed the truth. It turned out that Yik-jeong hadn't spread the rumors, he had merely ignored them. Originally, his evasive action when taking medication made Park Mi-jeong realize he felt ashamed of his condition, and to avoid her seeing him take his medication at school, he didn't take it, leading to a sudden epileptic attack. To hide his so-called shame, Park Mi-jeong had lied that he had been stung by a hornet. While Yik-jeong appreciated Park Mi-jeong's efforts, he also felt that the situation arose because of her. Lee Dong-jin then showed him the notebook to make him see his original message, feeling that fate was unjust. Why did he have to suffer so much just to talk to Park Mi-jeong, while someone who could evade these rules did not cherish the opportunity? Lee Dong-jin then returned home and added his own findings to the data. After all, if he let go now, he would just be a stalker, troubling Park Mi-jeong. Lee Dong-jin has now deduced the variable involving Park Mi-jeong. Only the person she loves can break the rule. He archived all the relevant data and marked all the books translated by Park Mi-jeong. In the days that followed, he devoted all his energy to physical training, betting everything on this last variable. Later, Lee Dong-jin arrived at Park Mi-jeong's building with his packed luggage and rang her doorbell. It was then that Park Mi-jeong realized that the delivery man was actually Lee Dong-jin. Prepared to risk his life, Lee Dong-jin wanted to speak his mind. Park Mi-jeong pleaded with him not to speak. Lee Dong-jin then presented a gift from friends back home intended for Park Mi-jeong. As he was about to leave, he mentioned that the vital words he risked his life to say would be spoken when the time was right. He then turned to leave, but paused after a few steps to remind Park Mi-jeong that it was okay for her to do what she wanted. Park Mi-jeong had always felt a certain fondness for Lee Dong-jin. They had often exchanged glances since middle school, but the distance was too great for her to see his face clearly. She knew about the sunshade Lee Dong-jin had installed for her, so she wanted to talk to him. Unfortunately, she dropped out of school before they could converse. It was only later, in the graduation yearbook, that she clearly saw his face for the first time, a face both unfamiliar and familiar. Thus, while Park Mi-jeong felt both moved and worried, Lee Dong-jin had not crossed the 10-minute warning line, but had exceeded the limit of 10 sentences in conversation. As soon as he stepped outside, he narrowly missed being hit by a car, and sparks flew from a transformer above him. Unconcerned, he recklessly walked down the middle of the road. At that moment, a small truck was heading straight towards him. The gift Lee Dong-jin gave to Park Mi-jeong was a USB drive. It contained photos he took of Park Mi-jeong's childhood home and an apology video from a classmate. This long overdue apology brought years of Park Mi-jeong's suppressed emotions flooding out, providing her temporary comfort. However, Lee Dong-jin was hit by a speeding truck. Following this, Park Mi-jeong's best friend contacted Lee Dong-jin's police officer friend after receiving a text message. The officer's standoffish demeanor offended her, leading her to suspect he had no friends, as he hadn't reached out once during Lee Dong-jin's half-month disappearance. In reality, the officer had tried contacting Lee Dong-jin, but there was no answer. Later, the officer contacted a senior from university who informed him that Lee Dong-jin had sent him some materials after resigning. Based on the address provided, the officer went to the residential building and, using his detective authority, had the landlord open Lee Dong-jin's apartment. The place was spotlessly cleaned, but the officer focused on the bookshelf and discovered markings on the books. At that moment, a phone rang inside the apartment, leading him to find a cell phone Lee Dong-jin had left behind. The officer noted that the bookshelf was disorganized and filled with outdated books, unlike the type Lee Dong-jin usually read. This discrepancy, along with the fact that all the translations of the books were done by Park Mi-jeong, served as a clue. Wanting to know how the best friend knew Lee Dong-jin, she brought up Park Mi-jeong, but struggled to start explaining. Soon she organized her thoughts and asked the officer if he believed in witches. They returned to the room, where she pointed out Park Mi-jeong's location. Meanwhile, the officer noticed that the window glass had been replaced with the one-way mirror type used in police interrogation rooms, making it impossible to see into the room from outside without the lights on. At that moment, the officer suddenly saw something and turned off the room's lights. They finally noticed English words on the window, which immediately gave the officer a clue. He turned on the computer and went straight to Lee Dong-jin's community page. Although there were only 2 posts, the timing matched the text messages Lee Dong-jin had sent them. While the officer was thinking, the best friend grabbed the mouse and, following hints from the first statistical report mentioned in the posts and Lee Dong-jin's signature coincidentally, used the English words as a username to try to access the statistical data on the computer. However, they were stumped by the password. After some thinking, they used a student ID to access Lee Dong-jin's account, which contained all the data he had compiled and his experimental results. They then opened the wardrobe and were shocked to find damaged protective gear. The pair realized that in just a few months, Lee Dong-jin had endured many hardships for Park Mi-jeong. Even those who did not believe in witch legends might have to reconsider their views. The officer planned to personally ask Park Mi-jeong since she was the last person to see Lee Dong-jin, but the best friend strongly disagreed with letting Park Mi-jeong know the truth. This was because Park Mi-jeong was living in the attic to isolate herself and avoid harming others. The best friend feared that revealing Lee Dong-jin's fate might cause Park Mi-jeong to collapse. Helplessly, the officer had to proceed with reporting Lee Dong-jin as missing and asked colleagues to check for any unidentified male bodies recently. Not long after, the best friend fell asleep against the wall, and the officer covered her with a thin blanket. Suddenly, the alarm set for 2:30 a.m. on the officer's phone rang. He checked the time, looked out the window at Park Mi-jeong, and followed her to the alley where she fed cats. The officer checked the time again, and after calculating a distance of 10 meters and a 10-minute interval, he revealed his police identity and started a conversation with her. Their talk soon exceeded 10 sentences and 10 minutes, yet he remained calm despite violating several rules. Passing motorbikes did not harm him. After the recent confirmation, the officer fully understood Lee Dong-jin's intentions and realized that his hypothesis was perfectly formulated. As the officer wandered aimlessly, the best friend called him over. She had woken up and discovered another secret in the statistical data. Lee Dong-jin had compiled not only Park Mi-jeong's data, but also the officer's. The officer's aloof demeanor was because the women he fell in love with also experienced various accidents. Meanwhile, Park Mi-jeong remembered Lee Dong-jin's parting words, encouraging her to do what she wanted. She looked towards the city she longed for when suddenly the doorbell rang. Expecting Lee Dong-jin, she was surprised to find the officer instead. After a brief conversation, the officer handed her a statistical report that Lee Dong-jin had failed to give her 10 years ago. Reading the data that refuted the notion of witches, Park Mi-jeong realized that Lee Dong-jin had been working since then to prove that the accidents around her were merely coincidental. However, Park Mi-jeong knew her situation couldn't merely be explained by coincidence. The officer then told her that the report was full of flaws, as Lee Dong-jin had initially set out to disprove the theory, leading to biased data as more facts were uncovered, ultimately causing fear and even dread. Therefore, the officer felt that the label of witch was, ironically, more apt and reasonable. He also informed Park Mi-jeong that Lee Dong-jin had now disappeared and wanted her to tell him what had happened just before the disappearance. After Park Mi-jeong's detailed account, the officer took her to Lee Dong-jin's room. There, Park Mi-jeong clearly saw her own room and realized that Lee Dong-jin had been watching her from there. Thus, the officer decided that whether Lee Dong-jin could be charged with stalking would depend on Park Mi-jeong's decision, for which he was willing to testify. However, he also revealed that everything Lee Dong-jin did was actually to prove the witch's law. Seeing that Park Mi-jeong was unaware of this law, the officer opened the computer and logged into Lee Dong-jin's blog. He wanted Park Mi-jeong to see firsthand the data Lee Dong-jin had collected over the years. Park Mi-jeong didn't understand why she needed to see this, as the failed experiment had already confirmed her identity as a witch. The officer then told her that Lee Dong-jin's experiments were not meant to prove she wasn't a witch, but to find a way to love her. He hoped Park Mi-jeong would deeply understand Lee Dong-jin through this data. After he left, Park Mi-jeong started exploring the data and finally learned the truth. She realized that Lee Dong-jin had been hurt many times in his quest to find a way to love her, even risking his life by jumping into the Han River. Touched by this, Park Mi-jeong also wanted to find Lee Dong-jin. A week passed, and her best friend told the officer that Park Mi-jeong had disappeared too. The officer remained calm and moved further away, which angered the best friend, who accused him of treating others like air or finding such irritating responses satisfying. Unbeknownst to them, Park Mi-jeong had already reached her dream destination, Hallstatt. The officer then asked the best friend why Lee Dong-jin had chosen him and if she liked him. Although she didn't admit it, the officer moved even further away for safety. The officer had always known about the strange occurrences around him and understood that they stemmed from himself, leading him to prefer solitude. However, Lee Dong-jin had insisted on getting close during their university days, bringing some liveliness to his lonely life. He had also accidentally seen the report and learned that others, like him, existed. He had seen Lee Dong-jin's helplessness and thought he might give up, but he didn't. From the data Lee Dong-jin left behind, the officer learned that Lee Dong-jin wanted to save not only Park Mi-jeong but also himself. Otherwise, why would his data still be there? Thus, the officer speculated that he must also be part of those laws. He worried that his best friend had feelings for him. As a result, the officer responded indirectly, asking her for some time because Lee Dong-jin had left a method to break the code in the data, which still needed verification. The best friend called the contact labeled narcissist to ask why Lee Dong-jin had gone so far away. The officer did not hide the truth and plainly stated that love is hard to start simultaneously. It only happens when one lets the other open their heart while waiting. The officer then learned of Lee Dong-jin's whereabouts and guessed his final gamble. He hoped that Park Mi-jeong would also love him. Meanwhile, Lee Dong-jin and Park Mi-jeong finally met in Hallstatt. Park Mi-jeong thanked Lee Dong-jin for his efforts, as he had brought her out of her enclosed world, something she had never dared to dream of. When Lee Dong-jin checked the time, Park Mi-jeong instantly understood his intention, which made her nervous, but also ready. She took the opportunity to pull out the cell phone Lee Dong-jin had left back home. Unexpectedly, Lee Dong-jin confessed his love. As he spoke, the distant sky turned stormy with thunder and lightning, threatening to swallow Lee Dong-jin for breaking all the rules. Clearly, mere sentiments could not stop the curse. After expressing his love, Lee Dong-jin respected Park Mi-jeong's thoughts and choices. He then got up to leave, prepared to face a deadly accident. However, he hadn't gone far when Park Mi-jeong stopped him. It turned out that Park Mi-jeong had already fallen in love with Lee Dong-jin, otherwise she wouldn't have carried his phone with her or thought of him during her travels. She also worried that he would continue to get hurt. In the data left by Lee Dong-jin, Park Mi-jeong discovered a variable he was unaware of. All the people who had loved her experienced accidents only after they were apart, not while they were together. She responded to Lee Dong-jin's love, and as Park Mi-jeong reciprocated, the cloudy skies gradually cleared. Park Mi-jeong and Lee Dong-jin finally walked together as they had hoped. Meanwhile, as soon as the officer got out of the car, he was confronted by his best friend who had been waiting for a long time. She pressed him back step by step, frightening the officer, as he was worried about harming her without confirming his feelings. The best friend then boarded a bus and confessed her feelings to the officer before the bus drove away. Just then, the officer received a tip from Lee Dong-jin and immediately contacted his best friend, urging her to get off the bus and wait for him. Seeing the officer chasing after the bus, she asked the driver to stop quickly. Thus, they too finally found their love. Park Mi-jeong still felt a bit uneasy, worried about Lee Dong-jin possibly encountering another accident. Lee Dong-jin comforted her, saying they were just a bit different from others.